Nam srishtham manumapi Sharchi putram atra swarupam Rupam tasyagrajam urpuring maturing goshtavatim Radha kundam girivaram Oh Radhika Madhavasam Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Sri Gurum Tam Natosmi Nindantam Pulakotkarena Vikasat Nipraprasuna chaving Pradvikritya bhujadvayam hari hari tyuchairvadantam ho Nrityantam galadasrunirjarachayai Chasincantamurvitalam Gayantam nijaparshadaih parivritam Tam goramevastumah Alibih paripalitak prabalitak Sanandamalokitah Pratyasam sufala sumana falodaya vidho Samudama mudita Vrindaranya bhuvi prakasha madhura Sarvatishayi sriya Radha madhavayo pramodayatu mam Ullalasakalpadrumaha Jai Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath E Chai Gosai Rakori Charana Bandhan Jaha hoite vighnana shabhishta puran. Jai Sri Radhe. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. So, this is Jagadananda Das speaking to you from the Jiva Institute in Sri Vrindavan. And the current project is the Priti Sandarbha, and we're on the 10th anuccheda. By the grace of Srila Satyanarayana Das Babaji, we are taking a very close look at this final chapter of the magnum opus. Actually, Jiva Goswami has two magna opi. He has two great works. One is the Sandarbhas and the other is the Gopala Champu. So pretty much I spent a lot of my life engaging with the work of Jiva Goswami, and I think it's quite an appropriate thing for me to be here at the Jiva Institute. And despite the fact that it is very hot here in Vrindavan right now, summertime, even thin cloth is a bit of a nuisance, getting all filled with perspiration very quickly. It's about 40 degrees. Of course, it's a little bit cooler here in the basement. Nevertheless, this is the price that one pays for living in Vrindavan. And right now we're having, of course, this lockdown with the coronavirus, and who the heck knows what's going on with all that kind of stuff. But certainly it gives me the opportunity to concentrate on this work. And so we move forward with our study. This is the 10th anuccheda of the Priti Sandarbha, and we're talking about mukti, and talking about the 5 kinds of mukti. And this particular section is concerned with spiritual bodies. This one and the next 2 are different quotations from the different shastras that mention or talk about Siddha Swarup, or about the Siddha body in the liberated stage. So this is not directly concerned with the Siddha Swarup as we talk about it in Gaudiya Vaishnava in Raganuga Bhakti. As a matter of fact, thinking back on it, when we look back on the Bhakti Sandarbha, the section that was concerned with Raganuga Bhakti, and did not talk about the particular sadhana of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which is also similarly practiced in other, what we call the Rasika Sampradayas of Vrindavan. So the Rasika Sampradayas of Vrindavan are primarily the Nimbarka Sampradaya, the Haridasi Sampradaya, and the Radha Ballava Sampradaya. And there are others also who practice this particular kind of meditation on one's Siddha Swarup. But that kind of thing was not mentioned anywhere, even in the section on Raganuga Bhakti in the 5th Sandarbha, in the Bhakti Sandarbha. And once again here, it is not being remarked upon directly. So we have to understand that even though the Bhagavatam has such great importance, Narottam Das Thakur says, Vichara Koriya Mone, Bhakti Rasa Asadone, Madhyastha Sri Bhagavata Puran. And Srinatha Chakravarti Thakur, he also says that Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam. So the entire edifice of Gaudiya Vaishnavism is built on the Bhagavata Purana. And this is what differentiates it really from the other 3 Rasika Sampradayas that were mentioned. And it's actually, in a way, it proves the primacy of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Although these other Sampradayas talk about being the origins, at the origin of the particular characteristics of the Raganuga Bhakti practices, which concern primarily meditating on the spiritual body, on one's own spiritual body, and meditating on engaging in direct service to Radha and Krishna in the spiritual body. So in the last class, we were talking about the 5 kinds of mukti, and how without service, diyamanam nagrihnanti vinamat sevanam jana, that the devotee does not accept any of the 5 kinds of mukti without service. So in actual fact, prema seva is the object of the practice, and the muktis themselves are not directly being prayed for. It's not the mukti that one wants, it's the seva that one wants. It's a subtle distinction, but nevertheless, it is important to remember that. So in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami says that nati virudyate. He uses the expression that these 5 kinds of muktis are not entirely opposed to bhakti. But the point is, that the point that Rupa Goswami makes there is that we saw this verse in the last class also. It was 9.4.67. Is that here or is that later? No, it comes to 9.4.67. That was the one where it says that Matsevaya Purna. So there, Narayan said to Durvasa that my devotees are completely satisfied with service alone, and so they don't have any desire, not even for the liberation that would be required for them to engage in that service. So it's a subtle distinction, but the point is there. The point is that the desire is for the prema seva. So it's not for the liberation itself. But then when you think sarupya, samipya, salokya, and even sarshti, that these 4 kinds of liberation, they are, let's say, related to the idea of prema seva. Because in prema seva, one wishes to be close to the deity, close to Radha and Krishna, in order to be able to serve them directly. So that's being stated here as we go on. So let's go on here with our part 3 of Anuccheda 10, which is the title we're giving to it. The working title is The Liberated Souls Have Spiritual Bodies. So paschatu nitya, so we'll talk about this a little more as we go along. But paschatu nitya salokyameva yatha bhavishyotare. So the nitya salokyam, that they attain nitya salokya. So this is paschatu. Paschatu. So the question was, the point was about where we left off in the previous class, was that that sometimes we hear about Jaya and Vijaya or some other personalities falling from the spiritual world. In the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, there's a whole story of Sri Dama and Tulasi, Vrinda Devi, coming to the material world in participating in Krishna's Leela. But these are, and there was a story of a curse also that both Vrinda Devi and Sri Dama Sakha were cursed to come to the material world. But all these things are not to be taken seriously. They're not to be considered exemplary of the jivas falling into the material world. It's a temporary situation for the sake of Krishna Leela, and they all go back. So concluding that thought, Jiva Goswami says, paschat tu, but afterwards, nitya salokyam eva, yatha bhavishyotare, that they have this nitya salokyam, that they have this eternal residence in the same world as Krishna. This is stated, so Jiva here quotes some verses from the Bhavishya Purana, which is the Uttara Parva. Om Evam Konteya Kurute Yoranya Dwadashing Naraha Sadehante Vimanasta Divya Kanya Samavritaha Yati Gyati Samayuktaha Sweta Dvipam Hareh Puram Yatra Loka Pita Vastra Ityadi. Well, O son of Kunti, in this way a person who observes the fast of Aranya Dwadasi, after giving up his body, rides an aeroplane accompanied by his relatives and surrounded by divine damsels, and goes to Svetadvipa, the abode of Bhagavan Hari, where people are adorned in yellow garments. Tishtanti Vishnu Sannidhye Yavadahuta Samplavam Tasmadetya Mahaviryah Pritibhyang Nripapujitah Maratyaloke Kirtimantah Sambhavanti Narottamah Tato Yanti Parangstanam Moksha Margam Shivam Sukham Yatra Gatva Na Shochanti Na Sangsare Brahmanti Cha. They stay in the proximity of Bhagavan Vishnu until the final dissolution. After that, O king, they are born as great powerful personalities on earth, having fame in the world and honored by people. After that, they go to the supreme abode, the place of liberation, which is auspicious and pleasurable. Having reached that place, they neither lament nor wander back into the material world. Yathacha jaya vijaya vritte tatra salokyo daharane. And the tatsadhaka dasha, okay. So the example of coming to participate in Bhagwan's pastime is the history of Jaya and Vijaya. This is an example of Salokya Mukti. Well, I don't think I need to say anything more, but the previous example seems to have been the description, another description of this Salokya Mukti, of attaining the abode of the Lord, as promised in the Bhavishya Purana. Now he says, Tat sadhaka dashayam api naigunyavesha uktaha. So this is an important point here that's being made, because he's talking about the sadhaka state. So as I was saying, in Bhakti Sandarbha, this is not directly mentioned, but here at least we have, the mentioning of the spiritual nature of the sadhaka body. Okay? So the tat sadhaka dashayam api nairgunya vesha uktaha. That even in the situation of the sadhaka deha, that it is said that the avesha, or the absorption of the devotee, is in the nirguna, that is to say, in the transcendental state, free from the gunas of material nature. And that was, as is stated in the 11th canto, these verses that are often cited, Satvikaha karako sangi ityado nirguno madapashrayaha. The verse is, this was quoted fully, of course, in the Bhakti Sandarbha, and there it said that Satvika karako, so karaka means the actor or the agent. So the person who is the person who is in the sattva guna, he is an actor who is not attached. So that's the characteristic of the sattva guna. But the actions of the nirguna, of someone who is transcendental to the material situation, are all connected to Krishna. So even in the sadhaka situation, if one is totally absorbed in Krishna and engaged in devotional service, that the spiritual body, that this material body is spiritualized. Dikha kale bhakta kore atta samarpon, se kale Krishna tare kore atta shom. Se dehe, in that body, he engages in Krishna's service. And so there's no question the devotee's body being material. Therefore, when the devotee, this is why the pure devotees are given samadhi rather than any other kind of last rites. So here it said, a devotee is beyond the gunas of nature, even in the practicing stage. As Krishna said, one who takes shelter of me and engages in action. This is I haven't updated this version here. So I'm seeing that I know that I've made edits. This is a frequent problem that I seem to be having. Let me see if I can correct it. Let's see. The example of the other coming down to participate. So the example of the other coming down to participate in the Bhagwan's pastime is the story of Jaya and Vijay. This is also an example of the Salokya Mukti. So the idea is that there are two kinds of stories here being told. One is about the sadhaka who attains the eternal abode and stays with Vishnu, and even after being with Vishnu. So that was the point there, because they stay in the proximity of Bhagavan Vishnu until the final dissolution. So that is there's a Vishnu Loka within the material world. This is something that is discussed. Where did we discuss that now? It was discussed at Dhruva Loka. Oh yeah, that was in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Brihad Bhagavatamrita, there is stated there that Dhruva Loka is actually Vaikuntha within the material world. So Vishnu is residing there in Dhruva Loka. And certain people go to this region and they stay there in the proximity of Vishnu. So they get direct association with Vishnu in this world of Dhruva Maharaj. But then again, they stay there until the final dissolution. So they've had the proximity of Vishnu, but then they return again after that as prominent personalities on earth. And then afterwards, they finally go to the supreme abode. So this is told in the Bhavishya Purana. So generally speaking, I would say that, I think I mentioned this the other day also, that there's a sequence of pramanas that generally is followed by Jiva Goswami. You want to have the Upanishads and the Vedanta to form your basic pramana, but then the Srimad Bhagavatam takes over as the most important Purana. And then the other Puranas follow where they support certain ideas or where they have made some kind of contradictory statement that needs to be resolved. So that's what's basically happening here. But in the final analysis, most of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas do not place too much importance on the on other Puranas like Bhavishya Purana. You'll see that the main Puranas that are cited are usually primarily Bhagavata Purana. Then you have Vishnu Purana is important. In the 10th canto, of course, Harivangsha Purana takes on a particular importance, but that's, again, not really a Purana. It could be said to be the forerunner of all the Puranas in a certain sense, but it's a part of the Mahabharata. It's a supplement to the Mahabharata, a killer. And then you have other Puranas. The Padma Purana is usually cited, at least certain portions of it, and Skanda Purana, certain portions of it. But these Puranas are all mixed, and they don't, and because of that, they're not taken as being independently important. Vishnu Dharma Purana is another one, or Vishnu Dharmottara Purana is another one. These Puranas have sections in them that are useful to Vaishnavas, and but a lot of them are like this, what we just finished reading here from the Bhavishya Purana. They contain many stories. This one here is from the Mahatmya of a particular Dvadasi. And so Jiva Goswami does sometimes refer to these particular stories about that glorify particular religious activities, particular rituals, and so on, performing Ekadasi and things like that. But I don't know to what extent they're to be taken seriously. Not so much, I would say. And then there are other books also like Garga Samhita and later Puranas that are almost undoubtedly written after the 16th century. So they're written post Goswamis. There's some of the Puranas and even some of the Upanishads were written later than the 17th, 18th centuries. So for us as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, our starting point is the works of the Goswamis. But you have to remember that Jiva Goswami is operating within a limited framework. He's operating within the framework of the Bhagavata Purana. So we have this idea of the Bhagavata Purana, he's established in the beginning of Priti Sandarbha that the Bhagavata Purana is the scripture that is the most authoritative. But once we have the basic premises that are established by Jiva Goswami, we see even within Jiva Goswami's lifetime, he set himself the task of working within the framework of the Bhagavata Purana. And occasionally, he refers to verses that come from the Padyavali or from some other sources. But he's not, he refrains from using Rupa Goswami as an authority prior to first establishing that the Siddhantas that he is stating originate in the Bhagavata Purana. I'm saying all this because the point about the Siddha Deha and this idea of the Siddha Deha is present there in the Bhagavatam, but the idea of that Rupa Goswami establishes that Seva Sadhaka Rupena Siddha Rupena Chatrahi, which is a cornerstone of the practice of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the cornerstone of Raganuga Bhakti. This idea is not directly found in the Bhagavatam. And there are many other things also that we don't find in the Bhagavatam. Krishna Sandarbha ends, and this is a good example according to, of what I was just saying about Padma Purana and these other Puranas. That there the Padma Purana talks about Krishna's return to Vrindavan after killing Dantavakra. But that is not, and then he finds some evidence to support that idea from the Bhagavatam, but it's not directly stated. It doesn't take the prominence that is shown by the Gaudiyas. The Gaudiyas give all their prominence to Radha and Krishna and to Vrindavan Leela. They've taken that portion, the Rasa Leela portion and the Rasika portions of the 10th canto, the Vrindavan portions of the of the 10th canto, and given them full prominence. So once that has been established, this is why I was saying just a minute ago, that the primacy of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the primacy of Rupa Goswami and Jiva Goswami in establishing the scriptural authority for the Raganuga practices that all the Rasika Sampradayas engage in, including the Gaudiyas. But the difference is that Jiva Goswami is establishing a shastric basis. He's establishing the foundation for these practices. Later on, the individuals like Harivangsha and Haridas Swami, they depart entirely. Also, Nimbarka Sampradaya could be seen in the same light. Nimbarka Sampradaya is an interesting case. Prior to Hari and to the writing of Mahavani and Sri Bhatta and the Adivani, before these books were written, the Nimbarka Sampradaya was entirely Vedanta. Although there are some texts there that they talk about in the like the Dasha Shloki by Nimbarka himself and a few other cases, but it does not really seem that an absorption in Radha Krishna. That's why there's doubt that Nimbarka really wrote the Dasha Shloki where Radha is mentioned and where the where Radha is given primacy of place. Radha is not mentioned in the in Nimbarka's commentary on the Vedanta, and not in any of the prior acharyas, the Vedantic acharyas. It's a Vaishnava sampradaya, and they definitely are Vaishnavas, but it's in the 16th century when you come into Vrindavan that you finally see the Nimbarka sampradaya fully engaging in the spirit of the times, in the zeitgeist of Vrindavan in the 16th century, where Radha Krishna worship becomes the total and all-absorbing interest. So that Radha Krishna, that all-absorbing total interest in Radha Krishna, where does that come from? So in the like for instance, if you take Radha Vallabha Sampradaya, in the Radha Vallabha Sampradaya, they put a lot of emphasis on Hari Vangsha being exclusively devoted to Radha and being exclusively absorbed in Vrindavan, and not spending much time or interest in anything else that precedes it. So Hari Vangsha is not at all interested in the other aspects of the Bhagavatam. He's only interested, fully absorbed in Radha and Krishna Lila. And in actual fact, that is the same thing for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas as well. The Gaudiya Vaishnavas, that says, Rupa Goswami says, Tadnama Lila Charitadi Sukirtananu Smrityo Kramena Rasanama Nasini Yojya Tishtan Braje Tadanuragi Jananugami Kalam Nayeda Kila Mityupadesha Saram. So this exclusive devotion, this exclusive commitment to the Ishta, to Radha and Krishna, which is something that is developing parallel, or historically it's developing parallel to the Bhagavatam. But it's considered that when Rupa Goswami says that kalam nayeda kila mityupadesha saram, that one should exclusively commit oneself to residing in Vrindavan, to associating with a rasik, tadanuragi jananugami, to an anuragi, someone who has loving affection for Radha and Krishna, exclusively. That is the nature of Gaudiya Vaishnava sadhana. Not to, fluctuate. And, we had that idea also in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Jiva Goswami talks about, and I think perhaps we'll encounter this idea, if not here, at least in the Bhakti Sandarbha it's found. The idea that one has a fluctuating relationship with the deity. So you see people, Rupa Goswami calls it Shuddha. There's a Shuddha Bhava, that one has affection for Krishna. Krishna is the goal, but the mood, the relationship that one has with Krishna is flickering in terms of it. Sometimes one has a relationship with Krishna as a servant, sometimes as a friend, and so on, without having that exclusive commitment to worshipping Radha and Krishna in the mood of a manjari. So the rules of Raganuga Bhakti are similar across the board, but it's the fixation on Radha and Krishna as being the exclusive object of worship. That's not in the Bhagavatam. So, but without the basis, without the philosophical basis of the Bhagavatam, you can't get to that. So the Gaudiyas establish that basis, and then once that basis has been established, then in a certain sense they leave it aside. Of course, I was reading today about, I was referring to Bhajan Rahasya. I went back because the Siddha Deha, well, why don't we just go and I'll talk about it after. Let's first read what Jiva Goswami has to say, and then I'll start talking about what's been passing through my mind. All right, so utkranta-mukti dashayam. Aha, look at this. I'm always finding mistakes, so you have to be a little bit tolerant of me here. I've said it a million times already, I know, but my primary purpose here is to just keep on editing, keep on tidying up this translation that's here, and hopefully coming up with the most perfect translation that I can come up with, and also have no spelling mistakes. Of course, there's going to be other people passing behind me, so hopefully they'll catch them. But I guess I am a perfectionist in the end. This is perhaps my problem. I can't stand the idea of people finding fault with me, and that's a rather difficult position to be in. One should never think that nobody will find fault with you. It doesn't matter how good you are, or how correct you are, or how perfect you are. But at least I want to be able to say that if I say something, or if I do something, that I did it to the best of my possible abilities, and that there's nothing that I don't have to be ashamed when people point out my mistakes or my shortcomings. Impossible task, of course. All right, so now we've been talking about utkranta dasha. So the utkranta-mukti dashayam tu tesham bhagavata tulyatvam evaha. Okay, so even the previous, we just finished saying that in the sadhaka stage of the body is also nirguna. Important point. A very important point. You can't serve Krishna with material senses. You can't perceive Krishna with material senses. So this is the subject that we've been talking about here. Krishna has to invest the devotees' senses with spiritual potency so that they're capable of perceiving him. And even that applies in the sadhaka stage, because you have to chant the holy name, you have to have you have to have the desire to do it. And so in order to be able to fully perceive the transcendental nature of the holy name, you have to be entirely committed to it. So you have to have the senses and the mind to be able to perceive the holy name. And that goes on to all aspects of devotional service. So now he says that utkranta-mukti dashayam, so after death, when one is in the state of final liberation, then tesham bhagavat tulyatvam evaha. So at that time, the devotees attain equality to Krishna. So in the state of liberation, after giving up the body, they are described as being equal to Bhagavan. The verse is, this is from the Bhagavatam, again, 3rd canto, 15th chapter. So this is from that famous 15th chapter that we've been seeing a lot of. This is where the Kumaras come to Vaikuntha. So this is just the first arrival, when the Kumaras first arrived. This is Brahma himself who's telling the story. So they arrive there. Vasanti yatra purushaha sarve Vaikuntha-murtayaha ye nimitta nimittena dharmena radhayan harim. So the important word here is Vaikuntha-murtayaha. The word Vaikuntha is a name for Vishnu, but it's also a name for his world. So when it says Vaikuntha-murtayaha, then it means that they have bodies, murtis, that are like that of Vaikuntha or Narayan. So it's the description of Vaikuntha. This is the Kumaras are arriving in Vaikuntha and not in Vrindavan or Shveta. It says Vasanti Yatra, where reside Vasanti Purushaha, Sarve Vaikuntha Murtayaha. They all have forms like that of Vaikuntha Narayan. And what is their character? It goes on a little bit further. Ye nimitta nimittena, where they, for the purpose of no purpose. The word nimitta is interesting. Nimitta matram bhava sabya sachin in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna tells Arjuna, you become a an agent. You become an instrument. So the real word, the real meaning of nimitta is to be an instrument. But here, it's given a bit of a different meaning. We'll see in the commentary. They worship Hari. Living there in the spiritual world, they worship Lord Hari with a dharma that is animitta nimitta. Nimitta here means a purpose. So they worship him for the purpose of no purpose. In other words, they worship him for its own sake. All the people residing there in Vaikuntha have forms like that of Bhagavan Vaikuntha and are engaged in the worship of Hari by performing their religious duties without any motive. I translate dharma as religious duties. Dharma means more than just religious duties, of course. One's dharma is one's natural activity. But because in the material world human beings are split between the natural activities of that are bestowed upon them by the material nature, and then there's a dharma of the soul, a nirguna dharma, and so there's a conflict, often a conflict between the two, and there can be conflict between dharmas within the modes of nature as well. Like you have rajas, tamas, and sattva. So a dharma that is the natural proclivities of someone in the tamo guna are rather different from those in sattva guna. So in that case, we consider the activities of someone in the sattva guna to be dharma. And that's where the difference in the meaning of the word arises. Some of the subtle distinctions in the meaning of the word dharma. So here Jiva Goswami says, nimittang phalam. Sometimes my computer skipped several pages here just by. So nimittang phalam na tan nimittang pravartakam yasmin tena nishkamena ityarthaha dharmena bhagavat akyena. So Jiva Goswami says that the dharma here is Bhagavata dharma, and that nimitta means a motive. So they are, the translation, let's see. So motive, nimittang, means the result or reason for which one engages in an action. Therefore, animitta nimittena means that which is not inspired by any desire for a result. It means, therefore, desirelessness. And religious duties refers to the Bhagavata Dharma. So they're engaged in the Bhagavata Dharma. So Bhagavata Dharmas, these are nitya, right? The dharmas, the Bhagavata Dharmas that are described for the sadhaka in Vaikuntha, those are engaged in eternally. So things like Shravanam, Kirtanam, and so on. These are not activities that are restricted to the material world. They're eternal activities. That's why you need nirguna senses in order to be able to engage in them. Vaikuntasya bhagavato jyotirangshra bhuta Vaikuntha loka shobha rupa ya ananta murtayas tatra vartante tasam ekaya saha muktasya ekasya murtihi bhagavata kriyate iti vaikuntasya murtir iva murtir yesham ityuktam. So Vaikuntha here means Bhagavato. So Vaikuntha Murtaya, that's the expression that he's working on here. So it means a Jyotir Angsha Bhuta. So these forms are created out of a portion of Bhagavan's Jyoti. In other words, out of his internal potency. Vaikuntha Loka Shobha Rupa, and they are making the world of Vaikuntha more beautiful. Ananta, there are infinite number of them. All of them, so these forms, these infinite number of forms that are beautifying the abode of Vaikuntha, that were produced out of the effulgence of the Lord, that so tasam ekayasaha muktasya ekasya murtihi. So this is a very important point. So every liberated soul is engaged in his eternal form with one of those forms of the Lord. So this is something that I have been thinking about logically for some time. And I think that this here is a, well, let's just go on. Tasam ekayasaha muktasya ekasya murtihi bhagavata kriyate. So each one of those forms of the liberated souls is kriyate, is created by the Lord to be with one of his own infinite number of forms. So there's an infinite number of jivas, and Krishna has infinite number of forms, and each one of those forms has an eternal relationship with one individual soul in the liberated stage. Now, this is particularly significant, right? So if we talk about the conditioned soul, that the individual soul is situated in the material body, but in this material body, which is like a tree, there are two birds, right? So it's like each individual soul is engaged in a particular relationship with an individual form of Krishna. So that means more than just simply one form of Krishna, or one form of Narayan, or one form of Vishnu. It means that the entire Krishna, wherever Krishna goes, he goes with an entire world. And he goes with an entire world of associates, right? Like the world is not alone, but it's full of parshadas. So parshadas like Nanda and so on, who are participating in the Nitya Lila in the spiritual world, they are actually forms of Krishna also that are participating with him in that particular created world. But that entire world, that entire universe, is created for the purpose of Krishna engaging in a specific relationship with one devotee. That's you, right? That's me. So my world, my Krishna world, my world of eternal relationship with Krishna is unique. And my form of Krishna, the Krishna that I love, is unique to me. Today someone was asking was talking, I was actually just reading about this in a couple of places. My Gurudev wrote a book. I was looking at it because I was reading up on Siddha Deha. So you can see just writing about Siddha Deha. I mean, I'm talking here. I'm just simply talking off the top of my head. But I've been talking about Siddha Deha, and there's a lot of stuff on the blog about Siddha Deha, which one can look up and study there. But the idea of Siddha Deha It's important for Raganuga Bhakti, and the reason why I'm no longer in ISKCON is because of this idea of Raganuga Bhakti, and perhaps we'll talk about this more in the next, because we're going to be talking about Siddha Deha for at least one more class, if not two. And so I'll be going into it in more detail. But this important point here, the idea that we as individuals have our eternal relationship with Krishna alone, really, right? That everything that we see, even if we see other people in this world, that actually, in actual fact, everything that we do is directly in relationship with Krishna. Everything that we perceive is actually a form, a manifestation of Krishna. Really, there is nothing else besides the individual consciousness and the other, capital O. Get down to a philosophical level. So the Advaitavadins are solipsists. So solipsism is very much condemned in Western philosophy as being totally ridiculous. The only solipsist really was an Irish bishop, Berkeley, and his philosophical speculations were rather spectacular and attracted a lot of attention, but were ultimately rejected because he was a solipsist. He's saying that ultimately there's only one truth, and that's the individual consciousness. That the Atma is all things. So when interpreted that way, and all the Upanishads are solipsistic in their descriptions of the universe and descriptions of the nature of the individual, in the nature of the Atma. But we are not solipsists, we are ultimately dualists in the sense that there is nothing that exists other than the individual consciousness, the individual Atma, and the Paramatma. So the Paramatma is the other, and everything that exists, the Paridrishyamanam Jagat, that all of that is in actual fact the other, which is Krishna, which is Bhagavan. So we're engaged in a relationship, whether we know it or not, whatever we do. If I take a glass of water, or if I read a book, or if I imbibe anything that's coming to me into my senses, is actually a form of Bhagavan. I'm engaged directly in a relationship with Bhagavan. If I love somebody, I'm loving Bhagavan. If I have a child, I'm engaged in a relationship with Bhagavan. So when one has that consciousness, when one engages in that particular kind of consciousness, that it's actually all these things that I see, that I perceive are different forms of my beloved Lord, that's when one attains siddhi. That's when one is in a state of perfection. So in the spiritual world, also the same thing is true, that Krishna creates a particular form of himself, and the individual soul also gets a spiritual body, but there's one form of the Lord for each form of for each liberated soul. So here the word kriyata is important, kriyate. So that murti kriyate, so it is made by the Lord. So so now these interpretations that are coming, that are following here, whether they're true to the actual text, is something that I would inquire about because of this word kriyate, that murti is created by the Lord. So the Vaikuntha Murtayas, so if we go back to the original verse here that's being discussed, Vasanti yatra purushaha sarve Vaikuntha Murtayaha ye nimitta nimittena dharmena aradhayan harim. So this is Vasanti yatra purushaha sarve Vaikuntha Murtayaha. So, Jiva Goswami's interpretation here, he's taking Vaikuntha Murtayaha, that all the forms that exist in Vaikuntha are forms of Vaikuntha, are forms of Narayan. So all the individuals that are all the Purushas that are there are forms of Narayan. So that's being taken. So the commentary here is that these are forms of Vaikuntha himself, and that each one of them is accompanied by the form of a liberated soul. So Vaikuntasya murtir iva murtir yesham ityuktam. So all these Purushas are also Vaikuntha Murtis. So he's using the word Iva here, like. So Vaikuntasya Murtir Iva Murtir Yesham Ityuktam. So the Purushas, they have Vaikuntha Murtis, which means that they have forms like that of Vishnu. But each one of them is an individual, and Krishna is Tasam Ekaya Saha. Tasam ekaya saha. That means that each individual jiva who is liberated has a form that is equal to that of Vishnu, and he engages in a relationship with one form of God's infinite forms. One to one. You get a total. So in a sense, Krishna can give himself totally to a devotee. The devotee, the infinitesimal individual jiva, has a relationship with God, and the jiva gives himself totally to Krishna. So how can Krishna give himself back totally? Well, he has an infinite number of forms. So in each one of those infinite number of forms, he gives himself totally to the devotee. So this, if we can understand this, then we can understand a lot of things about the nature of the transcendental world. Because it becomes a problem, right? You have a problem that Nanda Maharaj, for instance, Nanda Maharaj. So Nanda Maharaj, in each one of the prakashas, Vrindavan has an infinite number of prakashas. So in each one of those prakashas, Nanda is there, Yashoda is there, and so on. So now if Nanda and Yashoda are individual jivas like us, this is why it's said that you don't do aropa, you don't identify yourself with Nanda or with Radha or with anybody else. That's also considered to be ahangra upasana. Just like identifying yourself with Krishna is ahangra upasana, identifying yourself with Nanda Maharaj or with any of the other eternal residents of Vaikuntha is also a kind of ahangra upasana. Why? Because those are also forms of Krishna himself. So I read the translation. There are unlimited forms existing there, each of which is a portion of the effulgence of Bhagavan, also known as Vaikuntha, that beautify his abode. To be united with one of these forms, Bhagavan creates a form for each liberated self. For this reason, it was said in the above verse that people residing there have forms like that of Bhagavan Vaikuntha, Vaikuntha Murtaya. Commentary. Now this is the question that we have here. Now I look back, and what Babaji says here is taken from, so here we have a parampara also of this Priti Sandarbha. So Babaji, we know, is a disciple of Haridas Shastri. And Haridas Shastri's edition of Priti Sandarbha. I haven't examined the other Sandarbhas, so I haven't examined Haridas Shastri's translations of the other Sandarbhas very closely, nor have I compared them to Pran Gopal Goswami's editions. But Pran Gopal Goswami's edition is an excellent edition of the Sandarbhas, and the Priti Sandarbha in particular. Excellent job that he did. I haven't seen some of the other earlier editions of the Sandarbhas like Shamnal Goswami and that. I've seen other ones, so that I've seen some other versions, but we're mostly interested here in Pran Gopal Goswami. Pran Gopal Goswami, Haridas Shastri's Hindi version of the Priti Sandarbha is, for all intents and purposes, a translation of Pran Gopal Goswami. So this particular section here is based on something that Pran Gopal Goswami has written as his own footnote to this passage. So Pran-Gopal Goswami has two levels. This doesn't show up if you look at Haridas Shastri's edition of the Priti Sandarbha. This distinction is not easily made because he puts everything together in one. So he puts the translation and the commentary together without distinguishing them. Pran-Gopal Goswami, however, he has his translation, and then he has his own commentary, and then he has his footnotes. So his footnotes are often a further expansion on the commentary. In this particular case, this is from the footnote of Pran-Gopal Goswami. So I'll read what Jiva Goswami says. And I've noticed, of course, that, for instance, in Manjari Swarup Nirupan, that this particular anuccheda is being referred to. If you look in Manjari Swarup Nirupan, we have that's available, I think online somewhere, maybe I did it, I don't know. Anyway, Manjari Swarup Nirupan, in Manjari Swarup Nirupan, in the last chapter of that book, Kunja Bihari Das Ji, he writes, he cites this particular anuccheda of the Priti Sandarbha to talk about the Siddha Deha. And really what he's quoting is not this passage that we just read, but this passage is being given as the source for all of these statements about the Siddha Deha. And to be quite frank, quite honest to you all, I think that now it's, let's say, because Kunja Bihari and Pran-Gopal Goswami and Haridas Shastri and now Satyanarayan Das Ji are all taking this as being the authoritative position on the authoritative Siddhanta on this particular tattva, that it's accepted everywhere in the Sampradaya. But let's just read this through and then we'll stop for today. And then tomorrow and day after tomorrow, or let's say, for instance, in the 11th and the 12th anucchedas, where there's more discussion of Siddha Deha, that we will talk about this subject in more detail. So Sri Jiva Goswami says that those who have attained mukti by Bhagavat Sakshatkara ascend to Vaikuntha after death and are awarded a suitable spiritual body. In Vaikuntha, there are many spiritual bodies decorating it like paintings on the wall of a house. These bodies are spiritual since nothing is material in Vaikuntha, but they remain in an inactive state. When a Jivan Mukta gives up the present material body, Bhagavan assigns a suitable body from Vaikuntha. This is the eternal body of that liberated person. It is called the Siddha Swarup, the Siddha Deha, or Parshada Deha. These bodies are eternal. They were never created. They have existed without beginning and will never come to an end. The constitutional position of each jiva is to be a servant of Bhagavan. Therefore, whenever one wants to turn his awareness towards Bhagavan, he becomes qualified to get a spiritual form. But that form is only granted when one has relinquished the present material body. So it's not particular. So the idea, I was stressing the word kriyate. I'm trying to figure this out here, trying to say, because when we talk about eternal time, what does that mean? Is there a creation? Why is it so important to state that the jiva did not fall down from the eternal world? It's because the idea of eternal time, that's why. So eternal time, when you are liberated and you go to the spiritual world with utkranta-mukti, then it's as if there was never anything else. The idea of the particular leelas, the particular pastimes that are engaged in here in the material world, those where there is a possibility of forgetfulness, that is, in other words, a world of time, a world of beginning, a world of three births, let's say in the case of Jaya and Vijaya. I was joking that they would remember it and they would tell the story, and perhaps that's true. But in actual fact, the eternal world is a world of the eternal present. So, can one have memories in the world of the eternal present? Yes, of course one can. But one subsists or one exists in a world of eternal present. Right? So Krishna, he's existing in the world of the eternal present, but he has, let's say for instance in Dwarka, he's remembering his pastimes in Vrindavan. But in his Leela, Krishna is continuously staying there in Vrindavan, he never leaves. So if he never leaves Vrindavan, then how is Dwarka Krishna having memories of his childhood in Vrindavan? So these are kinds of complex questions that defy the intelligence, and that's why we call them achintya. So does Krishna create a spiritual body for each individual soul only at the time that they are liberated and come into utkranta-mukti? Well, this is a way to solve the problem intellectually, that those bodies, those forms are existing there eternally in the spiritual world. They're not being created anew. But for the sadhaka, it appears to be the case. Because we're living in a world of time, so there's a question of being in a state of bondage and of moving towards a stage of liberation. So there's the appearance of time, but in actual fact, there is no time. Or at least, well, it says there are plenty of verses in the Bhagavatam itself that say that there's no time in the spiritual world. In the Brahma Samhita also says that there's not even a blink of an eye of time in the material sense. That time is always eternal present, just like the consciousness. The consciousness is one, unchanging. It's the perception of the things around us that are changing. It's the perception of the body is dehino sminyata dehe kumaram yovanam jara tata dehantra praptiya dhirastatra namuyati. The changing objects of perception are not the changing of the consciousness itself. This is also understood by the yogis and by the Brahmavadis as well. So the form, so the idea that those forms are eternally existing there in the spiritual world, but here Babaji says they're like paintings in a house. They're just there in an inactive state. This would, again, for the sake of understanding. It's for the sake of understanding for those people who have a sense of before and after. When you're in the spiritual world, there's no more before and after. There is an awareness, let's say. For instance, in we have this idea that has been, well, I can't remember where it's from now, but certainly it's been stated in many places. Vishwanath Chakravarti certainly talks about it, that one first takes birth in the material world in the place where Krishna is currently conducting his Vrindavan pastimes. So there one is born as a gopi, and one goes through life as a gopi, and one takes birth as like Ahiri Gopera Ghare. Narottam Das Thakur says it first. When will I take birth in the house of a Gopa, Ahiri Gopa, and when will I be married, and so on and so forth. He's talking about living a life in the Vrindavan of the material world and participating in the spiritual pastimes there. This is more or less what was stated in that passage from the Bhavishya Purana. And then after leaving this world, he goes to the spiritual world, and there he has utkranta dasha. And there in the utkranta-dasha, the sense of time that was created in the pastimes in the worldly Vrindavan, those are preserved as memories in the Nitya Lila. So the idea of a birth, the idea of a marriage, the idea of different things happening in one's childhood and so on, memories, all these memories are adapted from that particular Lila. So when one enters into the spiritual world, however, that sense of time is carried through, but in a different way, in the idea of the eternal present of the consciousness as it goes on there. This is why it can always be new as well. It's like there's a certain psychological condition of self-forgetfulness, right? That some people, I don't know if it's a condition it's a rare condition, obviously, but people who wake up in the morning with the previous day completely being obliterated from their memory. Well, that would, of course, be a very, well, let's say I'm using it as an example, a similar example. One awakes in Goloka Vrindavan, each day is new and fresh, but it's not that there are no memories. The memories go on, but one is living, and one is conscious, totally conscious in the present. One is not living in the past. Right, so let's see what Babaji says furthermore. This is just a little bit, we'll talk about these things more in the next couple of days, I think. So performing mental service with the Siddha Deha is a specialty of Gaudiya Sampradaya, of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. Sri Rupa Goswami recommends that one should perform service in both the sadhaka and siddha bodies. When one takes shelter of a qualified guru and performs service without any ulterior motives or separatist mentality, and the guru is pleased with him or her, then Bhagavan reveals the Siddha Deha of such a disciple in the heart of the guru. The guru then, in turn, reveals it to the disciple, who then performs service in this form in meditation. Some people propagate that the Siddha Deha exists inside us in a dormant state. Every jiva already has a Siddha Deha within it. It is not something that is given from outside. Such a view is not supported by Jiva Goswami or ultimately by the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the next Anuccheda, Sri Jiva gives an example of attaining the Siddha Deha. All right, let's leave it there for today. And I think we'll discuss this more in the next couple of days. We'll see what happens. Jai Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Jai Sri Radhe Shyam. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Purnam madah purnam midam, Purnat Purnam Udachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Radhe Shyam.